God of creation, there at the start.
Okay, when I first moved to Arizona, I went to a Catholic school, and as many of you know, they have some different practices than a Presbyterian church does. So at this school, all of the kids, all the other kids would participate in things like confessions and communion and stuff like that. Well, I would be the one of two kids that would not be participating, and it was kind of strange being in that because I was like really different from what I knew, but I had to get through it because it was school, but I felt really out of place there.
When I was admitted to physical therapy school, I was one of the youngest people in the class because I was a little bit of an overachiever. And it was really intimidating because most of my classmates had either already gotten a degree, or some of them were even on their second careers, and they were, maybe even 10 or 15 years older than me. So I felt like I really felt like a kid, and I felt kind of naive and dumb, and that was hard because I was not used to being someone out of place.
All throughout middle school and even elementary school and then into high school, I was bullied very badly. So everywhere I went with people or with a group of friends, I never felt like I fit in. They always treated me really rudely, and they would bully me into not wanting to hang out with them anymore. So all of that time, I never felt like I fit in anywhere, and I was forced to be there because it was school, but I just had to learn to put up with it.
When I transitioned from middle school youth group to high school youth group, I actually felt really left out and excluded. I didn't know a lot of the leaders because at that time the middle school leaders stuck to middle school and high school were high school leaders, and there weren't a lot that did both at that time. And then a lot of my friends just got super busy and didn't want to be a part of it anymore, so I felt really alone and weird and awkward, and I didn't want to be a part of it, but my mom wanted me to, so that I was still a part of our church and included in my faith and had that community. But I just felt super awkward and out of place and felt like I just didn't belong at youth group.
Well, I felt myself being much more able to adapt to new circumstances because it was really new to me, and it was really eye-opening to me as well. I hadn't really been shown other practices of faith, and it's just pretty new. So,
out of that experience, I felt like I really grew. For one thing, it was such a small class that we all got to know each other very, very well. And these people that at first were really intimidating because they were so mature and so wise actually became very good friends of mine. And I was able to kind of tap into those things that were scary to me or intimidating at first. Those became strengths, and I had people I could ask advice, and they became really good friends and almost like big brothers and big sisters. And that really gave me confidence, and I think from that point on, whenever I was in a situation that I felt a little awkward, I remembered that situation was also an opportunity, and tried to just kind of change my mindset and recognize the possibilities instead of freaking out about how weird or how scary it was.
I have seen a change in myself because I learned how to be a friend to myself in the times that I didn't have friends to hang out with. And I also learned how to rely on God to help me not feel as lonely, and he was also my best friend. And I just learned that it was okay to be alone sometimes.
I really saw myself change when I became actually a middle school youth leader, and saw how the middle schoolers reacted to being in youth group in that kind of environment, and then realized that middle school and high school youth group are both places where I'm allowed to be and supposed to be, and that I could just be myself and that would be okay. And so then transitioning back into being a healthy, regular member of high school youth group, I just kind of stuck my ground with who I was and stated that that would be who I was going to be, and then found out that people loved me for who I really was and weren't afraid to love me for where I was at, which I previously thought that they would be.
If you left the grave behind you.
Yeah, grace means to me the God's forgiveness, even though I might not always deserve it. Because there's a lot of times when I've done something bad or done something that I probably shouldn't have done, and I can always count on the fact that God gave His only Son to repent for my sins, and I know that He'll forgive me for even no matter what I do. So.
Grace to me is when you get something that you don't deserve, or that you don't get a consequence that you do deserve. And when I think of grace, I think God, of course, is the ultimate grace giver, because we don't get the things that we deserve when we sin, when we mess up. But He does give us His unfailing love. And quite frankly, I know for me, there are many times when I know that I'm not very lovable, and I really wouldn't necessarily deserve that kind of graciousness, that gracious love that God pours out. And I'm just really thankful that that's how He is, and that's who He is, and that's what He does.
To me, grace is understanding the way God answers prayers, or the timing that He does or does not answer a prayer. I personally am not always very graceful about it, but I like to remember, and in those moments of like anxiety when I'm like, God's not answering my prayer, I try to remember that He knows what's best for me and He'll forgive me for anything, and He loves me no matter what.
My favorite example of this is one year at Forest Home, we had kind of an example of what that meant, and they said, if you steal $100 from me and I get my $100 back and you go to jail, then that's justice. And if I get my $100 back but I don't make you go to jail, that's mercy. But grace is finding you and getting my $100 back and not sending you to jail, and then saying, you know what, you keep this $100 because I'm sure you need it more than I do. And that just really has stuck with me. Of grace isn't just forgiveness for what you've done, it's also giving you more than what you thought you would get, and getting more than what you really needed, getting what you desired. And I think God does that for us every day.
A lot of times it's kind of hard to give grace. It's kind of hard to forgive people a lot of times, but you kind of just have to find it in the good of your heart to see that not everybody's perfect, no one's perfect. And everybody makes mistakes, and even if that affects you, you have to find it in your heart to forgive them.
I think to practice grace, you have to have a certain level of compassion and empathy, and because if you don't understand where people are coming from, or you don't maybe think about why someone's behaving badly or treating you badly, then it's a lot easier to hold a grudge and be judgmental and nasty. But if you start putting yourself in other people's shoes and thinking about, well, maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe something awful's happened in their life that I don't know about, or maybe that person that cut me off on the road is driving to get to the hospital in time to see their baby being born, or I try and think about what might be the reason something's going on, and I try to not think of the worst about people, and then that helps put me in a better mindset to be gracious. It's not always easy, but I try not to be the type of person that holds grudges, because it's just too much negativity that ends up seeping into my life.
I practice grace by always trying to remember that God knows what's best for me, He loves me, and He will lead me down the right path.
My favorite author, Bob Goff, wrote this short piece about carrying a bucket around with him, and the idea of you have your bucket full of things and you want your bucket to be full of grace. And so then if you run into somebody that you're supposed to give grace to, that you have what's in your bucket to give to them. And my favorite part of that story is at the end, he got told, didn't I do this great thing? And his wife told him, get a bigger bucket. And I think that's super inspiring to me, of just like, no matter who you meet along the way, you never know how you're going to impact their story with just the bucket of grace that you have.